guess I was hanging out with a bunch of people that were making films, and I was making suggestions to their product, changing their directions, and they said, well, what are you doing today? And the interesting thing about being an artist is actually, you're never doing anything that I mean, in those days, art was not agenda-driven. Today, it's a whole different situation. But you had free time, and it was in the 70s. And so they came to my loft where I was painting and exhibiting, not in the loft. I mean, I was having external exhibitions. And the movie was accepted into the new director's series at the Whitney. So all of a sudden, my performance was getting reviewed by the Village Voice and the New York Times, et cetera, favorably. So David saw those products. We did 2 of those films, one in '74 and one in '77. One was called Montreal, Maine. The other was called The Rubber Gun. They opened at the Whitney and the Modern. Rubber Gun then subsequently opened and died. David chose me, but I'm trying to analyze what his thought processes are, and they're beyond me. Okay? So he saw the 2 products, Montreal, Maine and Rubber Gun, and maybe something else I might have done. And poor thing, like I said, he must have blacked out. And he said, oh God, this is either the craziest person in the world or the world's greatest actor. Well, I think he's settled on craziest, but we pulled the friggin' thing out of the fire.
You were right, Dr. Ruth. It was easy.
He had written the script, then his wife got pregnant, and she was having a baby, or whatever they were having, and of course David tripped out on that and took that into making The Brood with Oliver Reed, and abandoned Scanners. And then, to the best of my knowledge, at the end of a fiscal year, a film producer with whom he either had been working before or at least was aware of David's work approached him with the budgetary possibility of doing Scanners, and they had something like a very short period of prep time, which is good because that meant that nothing got self-conscious and it was banged out in a true seat-of-the-pants fashion, which is something I'm used to, and we did it.
They wanted me to find Revok. I think they want to kill him. But they never told me about you.
But the code word for me was, you know, David, how am I going to play this? How do I play this? I mean, it's because everything I'm saying is a question. And he's just, you're doing fine, you're doing fine. And so I distilled it to a phrase. Are we doing Alice in Wonderland again? Excuse me, Mr. Caterpillar, you say I'm a scanner? You're a scanner. Excuse me, I have to go back to my pipe. So that's how it was. David seemed pretty relaxed as far as I was concerned. You know, the only thing he would say is he would give me the slightest amount of direction. Things like, try and not bounce when you walk. And I asked questions through most of the movie. I wander through it as somebody who is a good mind, but suppressed, unreleased. But when the time comes to release that mind, luckily it was during a reshoot and I had the opportunity to rest. The ending, they had a final battle, and it wasn't dramatically presented, and it wasn't blended with the special effects. So it was rather abrupt. And so what they did was they had a couple of months when they realized this is not working, and they developed the battle scene with Michael Ironsides and myself. And they brought in Dick Smith to do the special effects. And they shot that battle scene over a 3 or 4 day period. So that was cool because I'd already spent all the other money. So I was happy to be back at work. And Dick Smith was already a legend. Yeah, working with Dick, incredibly intense. Not a great sense of humor. That's okay. He's got to focus. So when I say not a great sense of humor, I mean he is so involved in what he's doing. It's like a kid explaining something to you. You know, this is what we did, this is what we're doing. He showed me some progression where a series of heads were made smaller and larger and larger. I don't even know what film it was for. It might have been Altered States. And the process he did to replicate something and then to expand it and expand it and expand it. I mean, he was completely involved in the process, which was great. Now, he and I had a moment because there was the lag between the reshoot and the completion, and I had gone back under the rock that I was found. And so the moss had started to grow back on me, and my eyes were starting to rotate in different directions. And they called me and they said, we'd like you to show up to Stéphane Dupuy's loft down in Old Montreal, and we just want to take a picture of your eyes. Well, that doesn't sound too difficult. Be here at 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, again, not too difficult. I usually have anxiety attacks by 8 in the morning, so I'm up and ready to go. But this time I had sort of slept in. I got the call about 8:30. You know you're down here at 10:30. We're sending someone up at 10. I said, oh yeah, okay, I'll be there. Yeah, you are? We're the friggin' film crew, film plan. Wake up. Okay. So I go down there after a serious night of partying, and where I probably went to bed at like 3 in the morning. And there's Dick Smith with a Polaroid camera saying, let's go up on the roof and photograph your eyes looking into the sun. Now, need I say more? I mean, please. I mean, it's just like it's like poking a moth. I mean, just everything. There was dust everywhere, and that was it. I was gone. But I tried to cooperate. I let them lead me up through the trap door onto the roof of the 200-year-old building in Old Montreal and stare up into the sun. Why? So I can get the right color of your eyes, the right color of my eyes. Why don't you just cut my eyes out and study the bastards? Why? So he did it, and he's like saying, who is this guy? What is he talking about? This guy is mad. You know, doesn't he understand I'm Dick Smith and I want to photograph his eyes and get his color? And he's talking like, I don't even know what he's talking about. So that's how we met. And he didn't have a high opinion of me. But later on, when we were doing the shoot, there was a panic moment. And Dick had been, treating me like an appropriate stick of wood, which I was happy for. I don't really have to be involved. I'm just sitting there, but I was well rested. That was a plus. And all of a sudden I noticed that, he's starting to get very nervous and more nervous. Well, this time I know I'm just sitting here, so it's not my fault. The bladders that he had put on were blocked and were leaking, and he wasn't getting pressure. Now, the reason that those things work is because they're fitted to a sculpture that he makes of your living face. Now, I'm an artist to begin with. That's my priority. I'm an artist more than a filmmaker. So my eyes are most important. And in my contract, as I was saying about not being represented, was you do not tamper with my eyes. I'm not going to do an exorcist situation where I've got cups on my eyes and I'm puking green pea soup. So, but Dick froze my eyes, put cups on it, and for the first time they cast a full head with the eyes open. So they didn't have to sculpt pretend eyes. So that's why in the final scene it's so compelling, because the sculpture, the head that blows up, was done against the laws of my contract. But I forgot all about it. You see, I forgot that was a stipulation. It was interesting because he said also, as he was freezing my eyes and putting the cups in, oh, your eyes will be tired afterwards. Well, I thought that meant like doing a lot of reading before an exam or something. But no, the eyes were tired like a hooker in the back seat of a Chevy after doing a football team. That's tired. That was a different kind of, that was raw tired. That's okay. So, well, it's okay now, because there was no further deterioration or results from that. And so he was having this problem with the bladders that fit on the sculptures, that the casting that he had made. And I was calm and have enough sort of knowledge to suggest that if you can't find the leak that's causing the problem, submerge the rubber apparatus and put the air in it while it's underwater. Oh my God, that's a brilliant thing, says they. And they do it and solve the problem, at which point Dick looks at me differently, because now I've talked his language. I'm in on the process. The exploding of the first head was magnificent. What a day. I guess they had put squibs in the original head, and they had made this head. And it blew up, and then when they looked at it, it was boring as ratchet. It all happened like that. So they said, well, how are we going to get this to linger on the screen? So they set the same scene up, and the guy, and this time they made the head out of layer after layer after layer of rubber, and in between each layer, and my wife just made spanakopita, so she put butter in between each layer, but in this case, they had the good Dick Smith jam in there, good bright crimson red, and the method of blowing up the head, I don't know, I guess it's well known by everybody. Gary Zeller, I think, he was underneath the desk, and the guy was sitting at the desk with his, or the mannequin was sitting at the desk, and they had cameras all around the outside, and there was plastic over all the cameras, their working parts, except the lenses were clear, and everybody else was behind this polyethylene barrier. So it was a splatter film happening live on the set. It was not being decorated by brushes or anything like that. And then I think there was 1 or 2 cameras that were shooting 400 frames a second. And they sounded like dentist drills. And believe me, I've spent a lot of time in the chair. And it was like that, and the magazine was finished. But this head, and then I got to see the stuff, and this head was so disgusting. And that was David's nickname, you know, well, not a nickname, but Dial Cronenberg for disgusting. And you know, because he always had something glistening and slimy in his movies, which I was okay with. I prefer matte myself, but glistening is good. And you don't feel it as much. That's why David likes it, glistening. And anyway, this thing exploded, and in the slow motion, the 400 frames a second, the head expands, 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 and it wobbles, and the facial features are still recognizable, and then it explodes. Oh my God, it was fantastic.
I can help you. We can destroy Revok together.
I thought Jennifer was terrific. She knew what was going on so much more than I did. Our first scene together, she gets, I get shot outside the clinic, and she gets shot or something, and I'm leaning over her. This was the first day of shooting, and I go, Flavia, are you all right? And she looks up at me and she says, my name is Kim now. Because the script had been changed. So, you know, how did she have the new pages and I didn't? I was a Canadian, I was an afterthought. But Hollywood royalty, they gave her the page that was going to be on the screen. God bless them.
Telepathy is not mind reading. It is the direct linking of 2 nervous systems separated by space. I want your brain to make his heart beat fast.
Oh, Patrick. Now, there's a man I bonded with. There's a man who was inside and outside at the same time, all the time. An incredibly intelligent man, an incredibly sensitive man, and an incredibly accomplished man. He could do anything. He was riveting. You just wanted to watch him. He was like any other fascinating animal in a nature documentary. He's one of those people, he was compelling to watch. Every movie you've ever seen him in Braveheart, you're just wondering, why doesn't the camera just open up and just live on this guy? Meanwhile, of course, he was not secure. And that insecurity makes you summon everything up. And there we were running lines in a Winnebago, and he looks up at me. Here's one of these guys, but of course he was unrecognizable with the beard and the way the hair was as the dapper spy from the Danger Man. And he looks at me and he goes, "Where did you study acting?" And I realized this is a big challenge here. And I said, "At the Oscar Levant School of Acting, Patrick." And that completely took the wind out of his sails. And that placed me, and he understood that in a second. And from then on, it was on. We were on. We were together.
You hear your own voice?
Yes.
Good.
You called me a scanner. What is that?
Freak of nature, born with a certain form of ESP.
I was surprised by the size of the release. I never saw a double-page ad in the New York Times announcing a film. It was all over the TV was running ads every 15 minutes. You know, in 5 seconds your head explodes. You know what I mean? First you have a headache, then you have a nosebleed, and then your head explodes, and all of that stuff. And again, I was in Montreal, and I was traveling to New York, and I had absolutely no idea that this media campaign was going on, because at that particular time I was out of touch with the media. All I was really interested in was crime photos or political stuff, and I wasn't really reading the entertainment papers, so I knew absolutely nothing about it. And I just had gotten off the bus or equivalent transportation, low budget, and was going to meet a friend of mine, and he was not where he was supposed to be. Typical New York, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, nothing to do. I walk into a restaurant, the restaurant completely empty, and I've got my bags, and I say to the guy, I point like, "Can I sit here?" He goes, "Mm-mm." So I go over to the bar, it's all empty. "Can I sit here? I want to get a sandwich or something." "Mm-mm." I said, "Well then, what? And he goes, "Come here." I said, "What?" He says, "I know your face. You caused a lot of trouble. Get out of here." I said, "Wait a minute. What do you mean you know my face?" He says, "I never forget a face. I know you." I said, I've never been here before, and when did this trouble happen?" He says, "Last week." I said, "I wasn't even in New York last week." I said, "But I'm curious, do you have a television set?" He says, "Yeah, I have a television set." I said, "So that's where you've seen my face. That's where you've been freaked out. I'm on TV every 15 minutes. There's a movie coming out. I happen to be the lead, but thank you very much for the hospitality." And I was gone. But and people don't understand. They say, "Oh, why don't you do more films, etc." Well, I was horrified by the attention I was getting, because everywhere I went, people knew who I was, and I was getting a couple of calls from major players in LA, and I know it's going to sound pretentious, but the idea of working to generate the income that would keep the people away from me that might have preconceived ideas as to who I am or what they might get from me by being closer to me. The idea of generating that income to separate myself from those people who my normal compulsion and need for affection was driving me to perform, to actually get the schizophrenic aspects of that relationship said, you know what, go to the studio, make paintings, leave them alone, they'll leave you alone, and that's how it's worked out. The work that I've been doing since forever has been a marriage of confrontational and that which makes you relax. Over here beside me is a quick triptych. The top two are just candy and delicious, and when I'm not dealing with the anxiety producing work, then I deal with these. These are like relief moments. But recently, I've even injected a little bit of destruction into the relief. So I've got destroyed cars, and I've got one on this series of 3. But the way I like to do the cars is to exhibit them on these giant grids of maybe 20 or 30 cars. And I'm working up to have a series of destroyed cars as well. That makes a nice blossom. This painting, as big as it is, was easier and quicker to make than any of the small paintings you might see that I do now. It's from the 80s. I was very much into graffiti art, but because of my visitor status here in New York, being a Canadian, I couldn't run the risk of doing paintings outside, so I did my graffiti inside in the studio, and then would wrap them up and have shows about them. I've had works in various museums and museum retrospectives, as well as magazines and art reviews and blogs, and it's been fun. It's been rewarding, and it hasn't stopped.
They're driving me crazy. How do you stop them? Your voices.
My art keeps me sane.
Oh, it was a great experience. Working in film and having people catering to your every whim, to a degree. They're whispering behind your back. But if you're smoking a cigarette, you hold it out and someone's there with an ashtray. It doesn't get better than that. It's the closest thing to royalty, which is why film people are probably the way they are. And it was maybe too good, and something that in my training, being brought up by lawyers, I was suspect of. So as a result, I was just as happy to leave it behind having tasted it. It was like a great night in a whorehouse. You clean up and you leave. You don't necessarily get married to it.